When we think of grief, we often think of something bad, right? But what if learning to engage grief well was actually a key ingredient to happiness? Let's talk about it. This is the Road to Happiness podcast, where we apply neuroscience and biblical wisdom to help you navigate life's challenges and find true joy. I'm your host, Cassie Spurlock, and I am joined by my lovely husband, Josh Spurlock. This is episode 3, Good Grief. The Road to Happiness is sponsored by My Counselor Online. All right, husband, good grief.
Good grief.
We think of it as like a colloquialism. People just say it's an expression of like enthusiastic engagement with what's going on. And it almost seems like an oxymoron, good grief. But actually, I think God has good intentions through our grief. Like he wants to use our grief to mature us, to give us a more realistic picture of the world, to help us engage him more deeply. So I'm excited to talk about all these things on today's episode.
Yeah. So, loss in life is, I don't know, it's maybe like eating your broccoli or something of that nature, or whatever you're nutritionally packed, but not fun to eat kind of food is, whatever that is for you. Life just feeds us disappointment and hard things, loss. And grief is the process by which our body metabolizes that and actually extracts nutrition out of it in a way that matures us, grows us, helps us kind of develop into the better versions of ourselves. And in the absence of being able to digest the hard things and turn them into wisdom, we get not good things happen. Like it builds up inside of us, and we can't expel it. We can't get it out, and so yeah, it's really necessary. It's really quite important, actually, even if it is stinky.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk through the process of how we actually metabolize this to get the nutrients out of it. But before we jump into that, I just want to, as you and I were preparing for this time together and we were talking about the essence, the nature of grief, how life is just filled with inevitable griefs. We have griefs every day, which is why it is a key ingredient to happiness, being able to process them. I think starting with allowing ourselves permission to call griefs. Like if my family knows if you drink the last cold Coke and I come in and there's no cold Coke in the fridge, oh, oh my God, that will be experienced as a grief. And that's not shameful or embarrassing or uh too small. Like there's no grief that's too small for it to be legitimate.
No,
Every experience of sadness or loss or disappointment on any scale is okay and can
yeah,
be used to grow us in wisdom.
yeah. Losses come in all different shapes and sizes. They come along with good things in our life that still have losses in it, and bad things in life, like your naughty children drinking the last Coke in the fridge. Like there's
Yeah, it wasn't you.
not me, never. That's exactly. Glad we're clear on that. Yeah. So, just their losses that are part of it. And, sometimes we get in this funky thing because of things we learned and experiences growing up, like somehow it's not okay to be sad about something unless it crosses some sort of threshold of scale, and that you're, a big crybaby or something if you acknowledge sadness or loss and it doesn't, you know, meet the loss police's definition of what it's okay to be sad.
Yeah. Or you're immature, or you have undeveloped character,
Mhm.
or that's acknowledging a loss or a sadness is going to send you down a slippery slope of being depressed and just only complaining about life. And
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think all these things that we've maybe heard or been told.
Yeah. When the opposite is actually true, that healthy, mature grieving and kind of having a well developed understanding of it actually helps us be able to move through losses and not get stuck in them. And it allows us to have a good gauge of what it is that we need in order to move through that. It's not about a pity party. It's not about like being stuck in this place of woe is me. It's the end of the world. Everything's terrible because my last Coke was, drink. Like that sort of disproportionate, I'm going to be angry at everybody for the rest of their life and kind of disown these children or trade them for chocolate or something like that because of this infringement against me. That's sometimes like the extreme that we have in our mind. It's either, you know a disproportionate, uh unhelpful, over the top response, or no response at all. We're not allowed to be sad about it or feel the loss, and there's no road in between there, when the truth is there is a road in between that, and it's a really healthy road where we're like, I can acknowledge sadness, disappointment, frustration, anger about life not going the way that I would hope for it to, and that being a loss for me. And in doing so, regulate my nervous system, invite others to share in that with me in a way that enables me to move through it to completion and learn from it and grow from it. And life goes on. Like you grieving that, the fruit on the other side of that is patience. Not
Mm.
like being able to grieve the loss that's there and accept it. The wisdom that comes on the other side is being able to be patient with and practice long suffering and to engage forgiveness. And all of that comes from acknowledging the loss and working through it.
Yeah, patience isn't not feeling any discomfort in that moment. Just like magically, you're not disturbed about things. So you're patient. It's actually the engagement of the discomfort and the distress.
Yeah. And the grief that produces that. Mhm.
Yeah. And something else that I want to mention while we're just kind of talking about like this overview is there are grief in good things too. Like there are grief in things that we're celebrating, we get a new job, but we're leaving our old job. We move to a new house, but we don't have the same neighbors anymore. And that's sad. Our kids graduate, but then they're not our babies anymore. Like there are a lot of really good things that have grief as a part of them, and it's really valid to acknowledge that and allow ourselves to fully process it.
Yeah, it's valid and it's necessary. Like
Mm.
when we experience loss, sadness, not acknowledging it, either intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't make it not be present and doesn't make it go away. It doesn't move through it to completion. The, those things just accumulate in our nervous system as unresolved grief, and they weigh us
Mm.
down. And they create some confusion at times. Like many, many folks that I've worked with as a therapist, are navigating, getting, feeling depressed, anxious and depressed after getting married or after, as they're approaching empty nesting. And, all these beautiful, great things are happening for their kiddos' life, or, you know, good things. And they're like, why am I getting anxious? Why am I getting depressed? around this thing that I should be happy about. So it's just really
Yeah.
confusing if you don't understand that even good things have loss that are part of it also. And if you don't grieve those losses, they accumulate in a way that can actually overshadow and take away from the good. Doesn't have to, but it's what happens if we don't acknowledge those losses and care for them. They can take away from the good.
So, how do we engage grief? How do we notice it, process it, and then in like receive the wisdom God intends for us on the other side?
Yeah, so the noticing piece, obviously is step one. You can't intentionally engage something that you aren't aware of then. And our body feels sad and or angry with losses. Sometimes it's sadness that we notice first, sometimes it's anger that we notice first. That is the protest against reality as it is versus how we wish it was. There's this protest of reality shouldn't be like this. I don't like that children sometimes drink my last Coke, put it in there. That makes
Mhm.
me angry that that would be the case. And then underneath that is the sadness of disappointment that I was looking forward to that crisp, refreshing drink. And now there's just a lukewarm one that I got to retrieve from the garage and do that.
You can't pour it over ice and get the same result. It's just not the same.
But it's the sadness that's underneath. And so part of that emotional intelligence, that emotional awareness is having an attunement to the wisdom that Jesus designed in the nervous system to notice when we're feeling sad, to notice when we're feeling angry, and to be curious about it. I wonder what this is about.
Mm.
And as we get curious about the experience that we're having, we gain meaning and insight into meaning around that. Like, why is this so upsetting to me? Why am I angry about this? Why am I sad about this? Like, and then this is me, whatever the case may be. And so that attunement then allows us to go, what do I need this? And very often, like almost always, if not always, we need to engage another human to bear that burden with us,
Mm.
even in small stuff, right? It seems silly, because we've been taught that it's silly, but it's not silly, like
Yeah.
you need to vent to me or to somebody about how irritating it is that the kids drank your last Coke.
Yep.
You just do. It helps you metabolize it. You feel better after you vented and shared your frustration and your sadness about that with somebody else. And they've been like, oh, that's so sad. I should get rid
Yeah.
of kids. Or yeah. And then we can laugh about it, right?
Yes.
It moves through and there's that release in the nervous system. And it's been grieved and
Yeah.
life moves on and it's fine and it's okay. But if you don't have somebody to process it with, to hold that with, you just stew on it. It doesn't go away. It just continues to be a burr under your saddle and kind of irk you. And so acknowledging it, processing it through and feeling it through to completion allows it to pass through on the other side. And we can laugh about it, have the release from that. And we can take the action necessary, which may be a prompting to forgive. I gotta forgive kiddos for being heathens, you know, or your spouse or whomever, and that builds maturation and character as we grow in forgiveness, even around little things. In fact, exercising that muscle around little things makes it easier for us to tackle the bigger things that we have to forgive in life because we're just
Mm.
practice at acknowledging and grieving and forgiving in a way that equips us to navigate things big and small that we encounter.
Mm. Would that also apply to, you and I have talked about the anger around things, giving us energy to change things.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about, if it was in this situation and the kids drank my last cold Coke, then I might be moved to talk with them and to label my stuff or to come up with a solution and actually put, tangible something into place. I'm just noticing that as another potential application.
Absolutely. Right. And this is a great example, right? Because it's so benign and kind of small in its nature. And yet all of the principles are true, and they're true whether things are small or whether they're large. The principles are the same. And you're absolutely right. Part of the action tendency within sadness is to move towards comfort in connection with others, right? That's where we kind of in sharing it with somebody else and they hold it with us and they care about our
Mhm.
sadness, about that loss, feels good. And we're comforted by that. So the action tendency of sadness moves us to that relational engagement where we can receive comfort and metabolize the pain of that loss, big pain, little
Yeah.
pain, whatever it is. Then the anger and that alerts us to a sense of violation that we felt. And sometimes we feel violated by the universe, by God, because the world doesn't spin the way that we want it to. And sometimes it's around specific people, you know, hooligans, that look like you and share a last name with you. And it
They
energizes
look like
us.
you.
And they act like me. It's why they drink
And I'm real mad
that
about that too.
stuff. But it motivates us, energizes us to do something about that, right? And so sometimes the thing to do about it is all there is to acknowledge it and forgive it. Sometimes there's boundaries to put in place. Sometimes there's maybe in the case of kids, discipline that needs to happen, or a teaching moment, with them about the experience. So the action is different in the situation, but the point is that when we attune to our feelings and we allow them to inform us, that it raises the question and we get curious about it and we're able to identify what is the thing that needs to be done in the situation.
And what I love about the wave of emotion is that we know that if we're willing to engage the things that need done, it feels better on the other side. And not
Oh,
just momentarily, but like actually truly resolved.
always. That's the way emotion works. That wave of emotion we talk about, where emotion is felt small and then it builds to its full intensity, which lasts like 15 to seconds to 2 minutes at its peak, and then begins to resolve on the other side. And there's relief and release on the other side. And the wisdom kind of emerges from having felt that experience all the way through. It informs us if it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel positive, it doesn't feel like relief, then there's still more to process through. It's your body letting you know that it hasn't completed uh, the feeling it through that needs to happen.
Yeah. It it's amazing the difference in the relief on the other side when you truly lean into the whole wave of experiencing it. Like you can almost, if you haven't experienced that whole wave, it's it feels miraculous how much better you feel on the other side.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how Jesus designed the nervous system. It's pretty
Yeah.
smart design.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, right?
Speaking of Jesus, let's talk about the spiritual aspect
Hmm.
of grief.
Yeah, and
Like,
loss and disappointment.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think I've been taught and heard over the years, that if you really love the Lord, that you will just be grateful for the things in your life. And so it's like griefs shouldn't actually impact you because if they do, then you're not truly grateful for the things in your life that are good.
yeah, which is just
And
baloney.
yeah. I really don't think that God actually feels that way.
No, God's not insecure. He's not like threatened by our questions or our fears or our disappointments or what we don't understand or, like that. He invites us to bring those things to him. And he's recorded time and again in the scriptures examples of that. I think some of the best are seen in the Psalms, where you see King David, man after God's own heart, just like wrestling with, Lord, how long are you going to let this keep going on? And I thought you were going to be my help. And why are you not showing up the way that I anticipated? And with my enemies, with my sickness, with my body, with my hopes, my dreams, there's all of these different pieces that David's frustrated and disappointed and discouraged, and he goes to the Lord with those things, and he wrestles before the Lord with those things. And it's not because he doesn't trust or believe in God, it's because he does that he goes to him and wrestles. It's an act of faith and a declaration of faith to go to God and wrestle with the things that you don't understand and the things that hurt and the things that are difficult. And so, it is spiritually maturing for us to go to God with these things as we experience them, just like Abraham did, just like Moses did, just like David did, just like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when he was facing the cross and was going, hey, can you do this some other way? Like, can this cup pass from me? That, or as he hung on the cross and said, Father, why? Why have you forsaken me? That confusion, that
Yeah,
disappointment from God in the flesh.
I
Like,
know. I know.
if you need
As you're talking,
permission to like wrestle with these things, I mean, every single uh giant in scripture, there are stories of them wrestling with these things with God. We're going
yeah,
to, you and me, we're going to. We have.
as you're talking, I'm also thinking about these giants in scripture having, people in their life, David having Jonathan, Paul having Silas, like people in their life that are walking, and Timothy, walking these things with them that are helping bear these burdens. That's how
Yes.
God designed it. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, asking his disciples to be with him in these hard moments.
Hmm.
Like, we need each other, and it's such a key piece of metabolizing the griefs and the hardships and the challenges of life, big, humongous, and the little day-to-day irritants.
Hmm. It's just how loss is metabolized, big or small, that there's a process to it, that grieving process that Jesus designed into the nervous system. And when we lean into and cooperate with his design, it produces maturity, it produces fruit in our life, it brings wisdom in us, and it allows us to metabolize the pain and suffering that's a part of life in a way that prevents it from bogging us down in unresolved grief and robbing us of joy that God wants us to have and experience.
Yeah. I also love how it gives us the opportunity to be incarnational to the
Mhm.
friends and the people in our life, to show up and make space the way that God shows up and makes space for us, to not be uh, angry or disappointed or, but just to say, hey, yeah, that's tough.
Mm.
And I can be in this with you, and I can bear this with you. And we might not have answers together, but we can just be together in
Mhm.
this space. And that's the Father's heart, that
It
he
really
does
is.
that with us.
That's what he promises. Not that we're not going to experience loss in life, not that there isn't going to be pain and troubles and suffering, but he says, I will be with you. in the midst of it. I'll never leave you nor forsake you. I will be with you through it. And we're incarnational when we do that with one another. And we are with people in it, even when we don't have answers, even when we don't have a fix, even when it's messy. We're with folks. We bear the burden together. And that's how we heal. That's how we grow. It's how we mature. It's how we navigate the hard things in life.
Yeah, that's how we find the good in the grief.
Yes.
Well, the Road to Happiness podcast is sponsored by My Counselor Online, a leading provider in online faith-based mental health. Sometimes people engage in professional counseling because they're going through one of those seasons in life that are really intense and they just need someone who can help them navigate through that. You know, sometimes we get stuck in grief. We need somebody else to help us walk through that, to help figure out how to ask those questions that are going to help us move through and metabolize our grief. And at other times, people engage professional counseling just to become the best version of themselves. Professional counselors have specialized training to help you see your blind spots, which by definition are blind to you, and to identify areas where a little growth would go a long way for helping you fully thrive in life, because that's what we want. Whether you need some help overcoming a challenging season where there are some large griefs that you're facing, some large losses, or if you're looking to maximize your God given potential, the Christian counselors at My Counselor Online are here to support you online worldwide. Schedule a free, no obligation matching meeting today to learn more. And if you do decide to sign up, mention the Road to Happiness podcast for a discount. We love talking about things that lead to happiness, that lead to thriving. So if you have any questions about any topics that you'd like to hear us talk about, you can submit them using the link in the show notes. Um, it's just been really good to get together today, Josh, to talk about grief. I know that when you and I were preparing for this, it just felt like yes, this is something that we engage every single day. Let's talk about it and bring it to light in a way that helps us do it really well so we can be really successful and thrive in these pieces. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today. For more information on this subject, check out the supplemental materials provided in the article that goes with this episode. If you've gotten value out of our time together, please like and subscribe. Maybe share with someone else you think would enjoy it or benefit from it as well. Thanks again for being part of our community, and we'll see you again soon.